I wonder what it is about the cold that makes you feel so isolated. Maybe it's the unlikelihood that there's other life out there that can survive such harsh conditions. Well, I found a game that not only explores this concept, but despite its 1 hour length, runs a lot deeper than I could have ever imagined. This is That Which Gave Chase. You enter the game in almost complete darkness, with no music, no environment, just the wind. In front of you is a character that we'll call the scientist, and without much prompting you except the dialogue, "We should keep moving," it urges you towards a sled with 4 dogs and a lantern to lead you. The main mechanic of the game is you're a musher using this sled to navigate the harsh environment, trying to avoid tipping over or falling off, kind of like a budget Death Stranding. I have placed a lot of trust in you. Wish I didn't have to, but my hand is forced. Time will show if you're the right person for the job. It was fortunate for both of us I found you when I did. I think much will come of this. As you move deeper and deeper into the forest, the music becomes more and more intense until suddenly it becomes day. The scientist turns to you and says the cabin should be close. And can we pause for a second to just say how creepy his face is? We haven't even begun the game and that's a jump scare in itself. Anyways, if they're still here, we'll meet them soon. As you near closer to the cabin, there's another jump cut which sends you back to the darkness. Not much further. All your efforts up to this point will be matched twofold, or worse. This is always the true test. A red light appears before you, growing more and more intense, but then you're transported back to daylight. Something I really enjoy about this game is it feels more like an interactive film than a video game, with the narrative jumping scene to scene and not being in chronological order. It makes for a really unique experience that I haven't really had in a game up until now. To some people, it could be a little disorienting, but to me, I found it really refreshing. It's in this daylight scene that you're introduced to the rifle and the new mechanic of shooting. I'm not a gun expert, but I'm pretty sure it's this model from 1886, and using this weapon, you take out a deer in the distance. After, of course, trying to shoot the scientist, picking up a mushroom off the ground, the scientist explains, almost ruined. Their behavior remains strange to me, though I understand it much better now. Everything here is pretty important, so just try to make a mental note for now. You're transported again, but this time to a completely dark and dead forest, unlike what we've seen in the game up until this point. It's here that you discover something new about the behavior of the deer. As you approach one consuming a mushroom off the ground, you also have to defend yourself from a handful of deer charging at you. I can only assume that the mushrooms are potentially causing the deers to become more aggressive, but you can also pick them up off the ground as an obtainable item. Although there doesn't seem to be a lot to see in this area, at the very end, there's a cross in the distance with what appears to be a person kneeling before it. But before you can get there, you guessed it, the scene jumps again. This time in front of a sign. We built these to serve as guideposts. You'll learn not to place much trust in your senses here, least all of your memory. Your next task is to follow these signs through the valley, going deeper and deeper into the never-ending snowy landscape. Honestly, I expected to run into Cool Mountain from Mario 64, and I'm a little disappointed that there were no references to it. Finally arriving at the next cabin, we reach a new checkpoint, bringing us back into the dead of night. This place is a sieve. Pass through and you shall find your imagined woes have been left behind. The ghosts that chase through the gray will never leave your side, no matter how far you go. The mysterious light appears before you again for a second time, asking you one simple question. Do you wish to leave? Answering this cuts to, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. Have I told you what became of the deathless deer? We were being humiliated by the conditions, and all efforts to chart a course were fruitless. Yet somehow, these stupid creatures were able to not just survive, but thrive. It's at this point that we have a pretty well-established narrative that the scientist does not like the deer, starting off with the small comments made in the earlier scene, but now this is the second time, so it's pretty clear that he has some disdain or jealousy towards them. After this, you and the scientist are in a brand new scene, lost, with no other option or route indicating where to go except for a single deer guiding your path. It's here that we learn just how disturbing the scientist's distaste for the deer is. We were eager to study these animals, to learn how they could thrive in such an unforgiving place. How did it know where to go? How did it chart its course? One said the animal could hear the faint beating of hooves across the ice, so we cut off its ears. Another proposed it could see the slightest indentations in the snow, and we took out its eyes. Yet we emerged on the other side, and the creature was reunited with its herd. Up until this point, I'm gonna be completely honest, I was just judging the scientist based off of his creepy face, but I knew he was up to something, and this confirms that he's not just a strange, smiley old man, but he's got a twisted view on this world. The next scene has you running from a massive stampede of wild deer. And experiencing this for the first time was horrifying. I would have appreciated some kind of heads up that we're about to be running for our lives. This is one of the trickier sections, and falling can be quite unforgiving, sending you back to the beginning. But if you can make it through, finally, you get a well-deserved break. It's at this point that I figured out you can actually pet the dogs, which was a pretty satisfying moment, especially because they're just so cute. Here, there can be another cross found, and interacting with it reveals something huge. A figure suddenly appears before you. Hold your tongue. But he led us here, didn't he? How could he have possibly known? It must be a warning, giving you further confirmation that the scientist cannot be trusted. Going past here, you find another cabin, and this time you're able to enter it. Inside it are various items, most notably the journals of people who used to be here. When the place chooses to give directions, we have no choice but to follow. His accounts of the North made great impact on my youth. Further on, he explains how, out of character for himself, this young artist decides to put his entire life behind him and focus on the expedition. And then flipping the page, there's one that stands out unlike the rest, with a giant black hole covering one page. In his eyes, I saw that same light which shone so fiercely in the horizon, leading us to the first sight. I recall that my heart sank, for I knew that light would only lead us further into the gray. This sounds just like when the light appeared before us at the beginning of the game, and eventually led us through the gray up until now. There's also one page stuck to the door that says, "For the outsider, the one who is being led, we see you too," which could only be a reference to the quote that the scientist said earlier when he mentioned the ghosts that never leave your side. I'm also assuming that this has to do with the figure that appeared beside the cross in the woods. Leaving the cabin, your only option is to keep pressing on deeper into the gray. After a long period of silence, the music finally begins to pick up once again. You may continue to retrace the steps that brought you here. They never alter. Do not worry. We are all bound by its grip. My memories are no longer my own, but I was able to reach you and be your guide. Just you and your dogs. An outsider, but it took a liking to us. Once again, the light appears. In viewing the events that led up to this moment, understand that I have been asked to play the part of the opposer, standing not in the way, but alongside it, who by ingesting poison let rot set in, and replaced old flesh with new. Do not ask me to reason. And now holding a knife, he says, "To you, I was a hand in the dark, a stranger, stood waiting in a forest. Now just as I brought you here, you will bring me out." Whatever this means, you don't have time to think about it before the player wakes up in a cave. And I can't tell if the player has no arms or if they're just tied up behind a chair, but either way, it's definitely bad news. You can grab the mushrooms sticking out of your sides, most likely contributing to the reason for you passing out, and obtaining these means, well, you can eat them. Ingesting the mushrooms brings the light before you once again. You're able to break free, and here you can find notes of what I assume to be the scientist, explaining that he remembers speaking with the young man who wrote the journal from before, convincing him to abandon his life. Further explaining that this isn't the first time he has brought somebody into the gray. Leaving the cave, you find the forest, and with faint howling and a knocked over sled, you need to retrieve your dogs in order to move forward. But it's when you find the second dog that you stumble across another cabin, but entering it paints a dark story. There are two bodies in here, one in a chair with an incision on his wrist, and another on the bed with a massive hole in his stomach. This was recent. It has to be the crew hand-selected by the scientist you learn about from the previous cabin. He wishes to bring it out, to let it do there what it has done here. Let him rot in his cave. After exiting the cabin and moving towards the third dog, a gunshot. You're not safe. Quickly, you need to find the other two remaining dogs without being hit by the shots flying towards you. Getting out of there, you might feel as if you're safe, until once again, he appears in front of you. It's a 1v1. With your rifle, you have to defend yourself from oncoming charges from the deep fog, and even dodge hallucinations firing at the correct target. Finally, taking him down, you can drink from his flask, taking you back to what looks like the beginning of the game. Although this time, the scientist in the sled in front of you is deceased. And that is where the game ends. It's difficult to say what the true meaning is behind the game because it's pretty open-ended, but I do have one theory. What once was an expedition to push deeper into the gray for research eventually became a hopeless, distraught battle for sanity. And the light seen throughout the game could be a result of hallucinations of fire due to ingesting the mushrooms. You can see this supported with drawings in the buildings of mushrooms, or you can see them displayed in containers, and also the dialogue near the beginning where the scientist mentions it was almost wasted. The player also ingests the mushrooms mushrooms, causing hallucinations multiple times, warping the perception of reality and order of events. Obsessed with his research and willing to stop at no cost, what started off as brutal experimentation on animals eventually led him down a pipeline of attacking humans, believing that they're the key to conquering this landscape. I don't believe that the scientist truly wants to escape. He wants to find what he was looking for when he entered the gray in the first place. A hopeless quest that will never be fulfilled. But that's just my theory. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Although the game is pretty short itself, I found it really enjoyable to dive deep into the story and try to figure out this puzzle. If you enjoyed this video, I make more content like this. Maybe check out some of my other videos. I also make music if you're interested in that, so I'm gonna play it at the end of the video. And yeah, peace out.